So while doing what I do last night, my son noticed and sent to me, just before we got the word of the Matthew Stafford new contract, the Giants have agreed to terms on a multi-year extension with their general manager, Joe Schoen. Now, that was a surprise for a variety of reasons. The first thing I found out, he was under contract for one more year. So this is ordinarily the time where you would renew vows or sever ties. If we want to keep this guy, let's do it. If we're ready to move on, let's go ahead and do it and give him the one-year buyout, and he can move on and we can move on. And to me, this is very simple. John Harbaugh, new sheriff in town, and he has decided, based upon his limited time with the Giants, that he's comfortable working with Joe Schoen. Because it was clear, and I'm sorry if this upsets anyone, I'm just reading the tea leaves as they are arranged. For decades, the GM ran the show with the New York Giants. For decades, the coach reported to the GM. For decades. They get a shot at Harbaugh, and the whole thing gets turned around. Why? Because this is John Harbaugh. And Joe Schoen, to his credit, knew, all right, that's it. It was fun while it lasted. I'm not the boss anymore. I work with him. For him. I work with him for him. And there's no way that Schoen gets that contract if John Harbaugh doesn't say to someone whose last name is Mara, I'm fine working with Joe Schoen. So the best news for Schoen and the organization is they're forming a fledgling partnership. So far, so good. Now, the other side of it, too, is until you can, and unless you can look at all the details of Joe Schoen's new contract, we don't know how much of it's guaranteed. We don't know if it's just cosmetic. We don't know if it's aimed at getting people to quit talking about whether or not Joe Schoen's going to make it another year. We've seen people get fired after 1 year of an extension. It wouldn't be unprecedented. So who knows? Who knows? And some are saying, many are saying, that the Giants specifically timed the release to happen right as the Knicks were getting ready to play a playoff game, and pay no attention to that general manager behind the curtain, and don't get upset. Because there's a lot of Giants fans upset. There's a lot of Giants fans that aren't happy with what Schoen has done, and they want Harbaugh to go hire somebody else.
Well, Harbaugh did hire somebody else. He hired himself. So if you want to know who the decision maker is with the New York Giants, it's John Harbaugh. And really, I'm not being critical of Schoen when I say this, but like many other GMs in his position, you got to transform from how you got the job into what the current status is of the job. So in other words, when Joe Schoen got the job, he had decision-making power, and he had Brian Daboll working with him. It was Schoen and Daboll, either Schoen with the power and Daboll just beneath them, or they're equal. It was equal between Daboll and Schoen. And then when Harbaugh came in, it's not equal anymore. So now the head coach has more power than the general manager, and the general manager can either pout about it or he could play ball. Joe Schoen decided to play ball. And there are many examples of this right now in the league. You think of George Payton with the Broncos. He came in with a different, I think he's the one who hired Nathaniel Hackett. And when Nathaniel Hackett is out, Sean Payton's in, it's a different dynamic because you've got a Super Bowl winning veteran coach who's on board now, and he's got a little bit more sway. He's got a little bit more power than when you took the job, and it's different than what you thought it would be. So, I mean, this has happened many times in the league, and I think the smart general managers adjust. Elliott Wolf here in New England, when he took the job, he had more power than Gerard Mayo, a first-time head coach. Matter of fact, he pretty much helped Mayo pick out his staff, and he was in charge of the players, in charge of the draft. And then Mike Vrabel comes in. And so it's a different thing for Elliott Wolf. So Joe Schoen is another in a line of general managers who see their power diminish, but they still got the job. The key is stay employed. So he stayed employed, and he's able to navigate this, Mike, because it's not just John Harbaugh with more power, but Harbaugh brought in very respected, longtime NFL employee and league employee, Dawn Aponte, a team employee too. She used to work for the Dolphins. Parcells hired her there. She's been with the NFL offices for many years. She's got general manager chops. She easily could be a general manager. So you see Harbaugh bringing Aponte. He's got more power. I can see Joe Schoen going, well, how do I fit into this puzzle? Well, we figured out how he fit into the puzzle, and good for him.
And again, without seeing the contract, we don't know how long this is going to last. Dawn Aponte could be the general manager in waiting. Instead of doing it now, let's give it another year. Because look at it this way. Again, it's going to be a holiday weekend. I don't want to spend time on the phone getting yelled at and getting angry texts and having people I know as the go-between because this person's mad or whatever. It's okay. I can deal with it. I'm just going to say what I believe. Harbaugh needs somebody to blame if this year doesn't go well. If you push Schoen out, you don't have anybody to blame if this year doesn't go well. So we give him an extension so people quit talking about whether or not Joe Schoen is short for the Giants job. They needed to do something because he was in the last year of his contract. I just am not ready to say this is the indication that these two are going to go arm in arm and have 5, 7, 10 years together. George Paton recently got a new contract with the Broncos. I think that is the ultimate seal of approval from Sean Payton that George Payton's the guy. And Sean Payton has said publicly within the past couple of weeks how fortunate he's been to have one GM all of his time with the Saints and one GM so far with the Broncos, and the hope is that will continue. I still think Harbaugh hasn't made a decision. For now, the decision is let's sign him to a multi-year extension. Nobody even knows how many years it's for. Okay, it could be, technically, if it's a multi-year extension, it's a 3-year contract. And how much of it's guaranteed? And how much money are we talking about? We don't know. We don't know because they don't want us to know. This is the kind of stuff the insiders should go out and get. The insiders get what's given to them. Find out. Here's a challenge to all the insiders who are otherwise sitting around waiting for the text from their source. Find out what Joe Schoen's contract is worth and how many years of it are guaranteed. Find that out. So, because that would tell us a lot more than what we already know. And you said one other thing, Michael, that I don't completely agree with. You mentioned at one point that Daboll and Schoen were equal. Schoen ran the show, as evidenced by the fact that Daboll is the one that got the heave-ho. And that is dysfunctional in and of itself. I'm a firm believer that they need to be equally accountable, and if it's not working, they both go. Because it's a message to them, you better work together. Don't try to throw the other guy under the bus. That won't work. You either both stay or you both go. Figure it out. So Schoen had to swallow a pretty bitter pill, but at the end of the day, he saved his job, and he's working with a coach who is a Super Bowl winner and a proven commodity, who is, as we were talking about earlier in the week, Michael, he's the most magnetic and dynamic and charismatic coach they've had since Bill Parcells.
Oh yeah, no question. I mean, you think about the other candidates. Maybe would be, I guess, Dan Reeves. Dan Reeves was accomplished, not necessarily magnetic and charismatic, but accomplished. And got them to a Super Bowl, but no, he didn't. He didn't. No, you know who it was?
No,
it was my guy.
Fossil did.
Who's my guy? Yeah, Jim Fossil. Yeah. With the great speech, we're putting all our chips in. We're doubling down. The whole thing. He was funny, but really, if we're talking about Jim Fossil, you're talking about Dan Reeves, Ray Hanley, Joe Judge, Daboll. I mean, they've had some guys. You go, okay, yeah. So I agree with you. Harbaugh is the guy. And it's interesting. Schoen is on the other side. This general manager position is just so interesting now in the league. So on one side of it, we just gave you the guys who came in with power and then lost power but kept the job. And Schoen appears to be in that category now. And I guess the dream is where Schoen used to be, in Buffalo. Brandon Beane was hired. He was handpicked by Sean McDermott. McDermott got Doug Whaley, the previous GM, out. Whaley out. Handpicks Brandon Beane. Beane gains power, gets the ear of Terry Pagula, the owner, and now McDermott's out, and Brandon Beane gets a promotion. So I guess that's the dream for some general managers. Not to say that they're trying to, consume and take away and just really gain the throne from the people who hired them. But in Brandon Beane's case, he really did. You can't script it any better. You come in as a lower level guy, and now you're the king of the organization. Football-wise, decision-making-wise.
You raise an interesting point. I think that the way that industry works, it either creates or attracts people who love to play that game. And the problem is you can't talk publicly that you're playing that game. But we've seen the game play out enough. You better play the game. You better want to play the game because you are. Whether you know it or not, whether you want it or not, you're playing a Game of Thrones within that organization. Some are worse than others. Some do it the right way. Some have everyone equally accountable so there's no game to be played. In places like Tennessee, it's whoever the owner happens to like right now. Chad Brinker, come on down. You're in charge. Oh, we're going to make you the president of football operations. Yes, you're in charge. Now it's time to move on. Robert Saleh, you're the guy now. Robert Saleh is the guy. We love Robert Saleh until we don't. And it all comes back to the owner. It's what the owner will allow. It's the culture. It's the mindset. It's the vibe that the owner brings to the building. That's why I say all the time the dysfunction begins at the top. And the person at the top either makes sure there isn't a Game of Thrones happening under his or her nose, or they're too incompetent to recognize that's what's happening, or, and this is the worst, they deliberately want one. They want to play those games. They want to have the various pieces on the chessboard maneuvering to apply their lips to the owner's ass and plan. Let's see what we can mess with next, right? They like that. And that doesn't help anybody, and it definitely doesn't help the team get any better.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, it's a really complicated, but not so complicated as you lay it out. It's pretty simple, but when you go into an organization with a certain role, I think you're exactly right. You go in with that role, but the idea is not to be kicked out of that world, but to find a way to be promoted within that world and stay as long as possible. And so along the way, you find yourself in some really compromising is not the right word, but you find yourself in some situations that make you really understand who you are. You can say who you are and what you believe, but then you're presented with choices. And often, let's be honest, Mike, if the choice is between, hey, I'm going to stay loyal to this football guy who hired me, or I'm going to show my loyalty to the owner who signs all of our checks, well, what do you think is going to happen? Most of the time, 99% of the time, people go the route of ownership because it protects them and ultimately could lead to their promotion.
What's the old saying? Charity starts at home. Loyalty starts at home. You got bills to pay. You got a lifestyle that you're trying to maintain. You're climbing the ladder. You're not doing this, grinding away, busting your ass because it's fun. You got a bigger goal in mind. So when that ship comes in, it doesn't matter if you got to kick the captain overboard. You're getting on it. We see that all the time. We saw it in Buffalo. You mentioned Brandon Beane getting the promotion. Joe Brady got the promotion. Sean McDermott, the guy who hired Joe Brady, out. Joe Brady becomes the coach. We see it happen every time there's an in-season firing. The interim coach, isn't that awkward? Hey, we were just working elbow to elbow trying to make this better, and it didn't work out, and now I'm the interim coach. And you can't tell me And this gets back to the whole consciousness of the Game of Thrones that necessarily happens. You can't tell me there haven't been times where an assistant coach who thought, you know what, this is my opportunity here. I'll be the interim head coach. We lose this game. Not that anybody would sabotage, but it has to at least cross their mind. Man, this is going to suck if we lose this game. Or is it? So there is a Machiavellian vibe to all of it.
Right.
Right? And it's just weird. It is just weird. And there is no loyalty. And the people who lose the big jobs understand there is no loyalty. This is just how it goes. I remember there was a time where head coaches would refuse to fire coordinators and get fired themselves. I think that's why Tony Dungy got fired by the Buccaneers. There was a time when that would happen. The coach would say, I am not firing these key members of my staff. You're going to have to fire me. Okay, you're fired. Maybe once the coaches realized the owners will call their bluffs, they decided to say, who do you want me to fire? You want to fire him? Hey, Bill. Hey, sorry, go. Whatever you want, boss. But, these jobs are few and far between. They pay incredibly well, and that in and of itself is what makes people who have them want to keep them, and the people who don't have them want to get them, even if it creates all sorts of weird vibes between the individuals involved.
Yeah, and I think, Mike, that's the point. If you look at it, and I do remember those. I remember a few situations where the head coach was asked to change the members of his staff, didn't want to do it, and then moved on. But in a lot of those cases, that was, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Think about the coaching salaries, how they've exploded. Everything has skyrocketed. We know the salary cap has skyrocketed. The money that the league gets from various networks and streamers has skyrocketed. But those coaching salaries, back in the day, maybe you could do that. Now it's more difficult. So you look at Nick Sirianni a couple of years ago. He had to move on from his offensive coordinator and his defensive coordinator to hold on to the job. He did it. It's a pretty good salary. But I remember way back when the late, great Marty Schottenheimer, who should be in the Hall of Fame, he really should. Marty Schottenheimer had a dispute with Art Modell when he was the coaching Browns Part 1. They made the playoffs that year, and after a playoff loss to the Oilers, Art Modell says to Marty, I want you to make some changes on your staff. Marty says no. Marty's essentially fired and goes to Kansas City and has some success there. It's interesting. One of the people Art Modell wanted to stay, I don't know if he wanted to make him the head coach at that time, but he wanted him on staff, was Bill Cowher. And Bill Cowher said, nah. So Cowher goes with Marty to Kansas City, and eventually, as a DC in Kansas City, goes on to Pittsburgh. But that was a different era. Now it's hard to take that stand when your average coach is making big-time money. It's hard to just say, okay, I'll leave that salary on the table, and I'm not sure if I'll get another opportunity this cycle.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.